to the one that we are used to seeing in darshan.
You know,
Who are you? Sorry.
we haven't spoken in 20 years.
People say most of you more than 20 years.
You know, when we went to the interview, to be honest, personally, and I think we were a bit, not scared, but, you know, we were told that Swami is God, and I think, you know, to experience that was, to think, or to know that it was God before the interview, I think for me it was difficult, because, you know, I just didn't believe it, to be honest. So when we went in the interview, I was expecting, you know, it's like sitting here, and it's something really, really hard and difficult and disciplined. But as we walked in, I think it was like going home in a way. And you know, he really broke the ice really quickly, and I think everyone relaxed. And to be honest, I actually thought we weren't talking to God; it was like a friend who was telling us what was happening. So, and I still can't comprehend how that happened. But post that, I think you know, I still feel like he's a friend more than God. If he is God. He is.
In fact, actually, Swami did say exactly that. He said, you know, when I'm with children, I'm a child. When I'm with men, I'm a man. When I'm with ladies, I'm a lady. And when I'm alone, I'm Brahman. So he said that to us in the interview. So that's how quickly he was able to relate to us just immediately. It wasn't like Swami was sitting up here and we were down there. He just came straight to the level we were at and spoke at that level. And it just made such an impact straight away. Like, he's so different inside the interview room. He's very different. Like, outside, when he's giving darshan, it's very formal. And there's a particular protocol outside that he observes. And but when he's inside the interview room, he's very relaxed, so cheerful. You know, you're his guest, is how he makes you feel. And the first thing he did when he took us inside the interview room is he goes, "It's hot, isn't it?" And he asks someone to turn on the fan inside before he sits down. He makes sure that we're all seated and comfortable before he comes and sits down. And he just starts cracking jokes just to make us feel really relaxed. And then he starts asking the questions. And like in my case, I was really, really fortunate. Like in all of the interviews, I was sitting right at Swami's feet. And for me, you know, it was like I had always grown up with Swami, and I always believed Swami was, you know, Krishna and reincarnated and all that. And so I was sitting there holding his feet during every interview, looking straight at his eyes the whole time, and just couldn't believe that I was sitting there with an Amitabh. And I was just like, for the first interview for me, I was just like crying so much. Before and after, well, during the interview and after the interview, found it really, really difficult. But Swami was just making it just so easy for us, by making it really relaxed. And I'll get some of the guys to tell some of the funny things that Swami did in the interview, because there's some really crackers that happened.
Well, it's for my nature, you know, getting cheeky and whatnot. You know, I got to be cheeky with Swami as well. I was one of the fortunate one to actually got to hold the vibhuti basket every time at the end of the interview that Swami used to dish out. And at one time, this was a bit cheeky. You know, I was just walking behind Swami in the interview room, and I saw this, you know, from his normal crown hair, I saw this one hair, you know, behind his robe, separate. So I grabbed it and I pulled it, and I didn't realize it was part of it. And Swami quickly turned around and, you know, almost wanted to slap me, you know. So yeah, that was quite cheeky. And at one time, from the main room, there was another little room beside his room, and he went in there, just left us all alone. And then there was a curtain, so I was sitting right there, and I quickly peeped through the curtain, and then I saw him here combing his hair, you know, and just you know, almost makeuping himself, you know. So yeah, it's amazing how how different he is, in the room. But at the same time, obviously, there's a discipline also maintaining the room as well. And obviously, when he's outside, he's totally different. And he teaches us that every step of the way, we have a role to play, and we must be aware of that, And it's amazing. Yeah. So he's a good actor, and yeah.
I think it was the first interview, yeah, you guys alluded to it, but I remember Swami actually said, sitting there quite regal, and he said, "I am God. I am God." And we're all going, "Yes, Swami, you are God." And he leans forward and he goes, "You are also God." And that was, wow, that really struck me personally. You are also God. And just his mannerism and the way he is, he was so gentle and loving with us, and yet just this depth of, like our heart really just leaped for joy, literally. And the way he would interact and ask us, and like for example, a personal experience, Swami looked at me and says, "Which is bigger?" And he goes like this. I'm like, "Huh?" Which is bigger? 1 or 9? Ah, 9, Swami. Goes off, mathematician answer. And so he's playing with us like this, and he goes, in spiritual life, 1 is bigger. And 1 plus 1 plus 1. Okay. And he said, you have 1 and lots of zeros behind it, worth lots. But you take away the 1, and you only have zeros. Where is the 0? God is 1. So these lovely messages that we get, so beautiful and yet profound.
I remember asking Swami at one point, he was talking about love, often talking about love. I said, "Well, what is love, Swami?" Now you can imagine, I'm asking the avatar, the modern day avatar, what love is, and he's the embodiment of love. I actually don't recall what he said, because all I felt was this incredible love pouring down me. But when I was reading the Summer Showers later on, I suddenly came across the words and it all came back to me. He said, "Where there is confidence, there is love. Where there is love, there is peace. Where there is peace, there is truth. And where there is truth, there is bliss." And it all comes to self-confidence. We need to start with that. And you need to reflect on what does self-confidence mean? It's confidence in the self. And it's not this body. It's God. That's the element. But it's just funny because I didn't actually hear what I said. It's just what I wanted to do.
Just something which Michael was talking about as well. One of the things that really stuck in my head, and I think if you can just remember what I'm about to say here, when Swami was here in his physical form, we all wanted to make that effort to try and be with him in Prasanthi, near his physical form. I remember, if you remember this too, we were all guided into the interview room, the very first interview. And you know what one of the first things Swami asked? Of course, He knows exactly who we are and where we're from. We stood out with our white costumes and our scarves. So he said to us, "Where are you from?" And even though he knows, he still asks, "Where are you from?" We said, "Swami, we are from New Zealand." He says, "From New Zealand? So why have you travelled all this distance to come here?" So we said, in a simple word, "We come to be with you, Swami, to see you." He says, "No, no, no." He says, "Swami, God is omnipresent." And I think if you can I wanted to just stress this particular point. We've all heard this before, but I want to stress this because Swami used those exact words. There is no need for you to come here. I'm omnipresent. Now, with Swami not being in his physical form here with us today, if you can just take that away with you today, that he is completely omnipresent, and we should really, really be so grateful for that and feel his presence always in our every breath of life. Thank you.
I'll just elaborate on that because Michael and Mikubai hit a really important topic, because one of the key messages that Swami was giving us over and over and over again was, he was telling us, you are God. He's not the only one that's God. We are also God. And in the interview, the very first one, he pointed to us after he asked us, who are you? And then we would say, who am I? And we said, you're God, Swami. He pointed to each and every one of us and said, you are God, you are God, you are God. And he's trying to really drill it into us. And I can remember this was the second interview. He was taking us into the inner room. And so we all stood up to go into the inner room. And I stood up, and then Swami stood in front of me. And he looked me straight in the eyes, and he goes, who are you? And I said my name. I said, oh, I'm Ritesh Swami. And he goes, who? I go, I'm Ritesh Swami. And he goes, who? And then the light bulb switched, and I said, I'm God, Swami. And he smiled, and he just pointed to my heart, and he goes, yes, you know in here. And he was really happy. And then he turned around and took us into the inner room. But that was just, that was the ultimate message that he was giving us. And when he spoke about the self-confidence, and he kept emphasizing self-confidence is so important. And he said, first there's self-confidence, then self-satisfaction, then self-sacrifice, and beyond that, he would say, it's self-realization. And he said, then we asked, what is self-confidence, Swami? Is it like the platform? And Swami said, no, it's very, very deep. Without the self-confidence, you cannot have the rest. It's like if you think about when you build a house, right? And Swami used the same analogy. He said, self-sacrifice is like the walls, and self-satisfaction is like the roof. And if you think about how long it takes to build the foundation of a house, it takes most of the time. And then once the foundation's set, the rest of the house just comes up really quickly. And so what is self-confidence? It is confidence that you are the Atma. That's the starting point. Once you start realizing that you're the Atma, then everything else will follow.
Swami, he loves to play. Just looking at some notes in the second interview, we're all sitting there and he goes, oh, how's the game? Where from? New Zealand. Yes, Swami. New Zealand bulls. They say, cows and sheep, Swami. So, we were getting the confidence to be able to jest with him, which is really nice. I think one interview, it was about 1.5 hours. It was quite long where Bajans had already started outside, and yet he was still, we were still sharing and talking, going backwards and forwards. And he would crack a joke and we'd laugh, and he'd go, shh, 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 discipline, discipline. And then he'd crack another joke and we'd laugh and go, shh, 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 no, discipline. So he was just this delightful play and joy we had.
Thank you. Well, while we're on this topic of messages, Jason has covered food. Covered love. And you've covered food. So the last topic we had was marriage. So could you share something on that?
He actually told us that a lot of the boys in there weren't married. So he was married. Sunil and that's it, right?
Yeah, I think it was me and Raj, Sunil and Sangeeta. Anyone else?
Sunil.
No, I think for marriage, Swami knows. And Michael would know better because you received a ring in the interview. And were you wearing a ring before on the same finger? Do you remember that? And Swami put the ring on the same finger, and I think Swami knows what our future has got for us. And like for Raj, he was always talking to Raj about his wife. And when we came back, our life changed, and I used to be a youth group leader. All of a sudden, I have become a mom. And I hardly ever had time to go to bhajans and do things that I wanted to do. But Swami was always with us, guided us, that first of all, before husband and wife, we are a really, really good friend. And our friendship has grown stronger. And this is all due to Swami's blessing and messages that he gave us. And now we've got 3 handsome boys. We hardly have time for each other, but we've never left Swami. I'm a school teacher. I talk to Swami every day in my classroom, and I go back and tell him how my day was before I come home. And then when I'm home, I have a different cap on. I'm a mum. And so he emphasized what I have learned is service starts at home. And I really changed the way I think. I used to run around rest homes in the youth group, do lots of services outside. Then I stopped and thought, no, my husband needs me at home and my kids need me at home. And some of you probably haven't seen me for such a long time. And people thought I have migrated overseas. No, I'm still here. I haven't changed. I'm still the same like I used to be. But my service is now in my school. I look after my students and then I tell Swami, this is what I have done. And the most satisfying thing I have is when I see my students come back and teach with me in the same school. Or when I had my little one, Ari, and who's 8 years old, my specialist was my ex-student, my midwife was my ex-student, and the nurses were my ex-students. And I said, thank you, Swami, you've put me in the right place.
Found it funny. I've actually, believe it or not, I've kept a diary. I kept a diary. I used to write almost every single day. And we were really fortunate. Sanjay, unfortunately, who isn't here, during every single interview, he wasn't looking at Swami. He was sitting there writing every single word that was being spoken in the interview room. And after the interview, and he couldn't grab every word because Swami was talking so fast and a lot of interactions happening. So straight after the interview, we all got together as a group and we wrote down everything in the order in which it was said. And so I've actually got the exact words of what Swami said. And so there is some words on marriage actually that Swami said. And so someone asked the question, what is the purpose of marriage? And Swami goes, to control the senses. Before marriage, like street dogs. Once married, one wife, like brake. And then he does all these hand gestures to explain. And then he goes, without marriage, brakeless car. When single, think of God and do good work. There are two types of marriage. Marriage with God, which is merge, and marriage with girl, which is marriage. And so those are Swami's exact words in the interview.
And he said, marriage with God is merji. He would sort of play on the words, on the accent of it. And marriage with girl, marriagy. Merji or marriagy?
Then he went on to say, he said first, he said single, he said 2 legs. He said, then he said after marriage, he said 4 legs. He says like an animal. And then he said after animal, he said 1 kid, 6 legs. He says cockroach or scorpion. And he said after 6 legs, another kid. And he said 8 legs, and he's like a cockroach. You know, that's how we would play.
He said cockroaches and went. Very dramatic with his gestures.
That was actually in the third interview, I think, and it was just the boys. So he's speaking to a bunch of 20-year-olds with hormones raging, and he's just trying to slow us down, I think. Looking back, it was like, guys, just don't rush into it. Think about it before you go, you know. And, yes. It actually almost put me off. It took me a long time to get around to it. Yes.
So, while most of you were single at the time, was there a message for you guys, like as youths? Could you share that, like with boy and
There was
girl?
one for youth, the unmarried ones. Okay. There's one point he did say to all of us, and I'm sure you guys will remember this, and he made it in no uncertain terms, was, remember when he said, when you see a girl, you've got to talk to the parents and get married. Which a lot of us, shocked at, because you've been girlfriend, boyfriend for a while, and that sort of stuff. But he was very adamant that don't enter relationships, and because the relationship breaks, and a lot of people are hurt. And he was trying to make the point that if you guys are serious, then go for it. He wasn't saying don't get married. He did say, he qualified it by saying if you do want to get married, then don't muck around. I think some of us did that.
I think
he said, this is what we recall, this is what he said. Don't do friendship. Boys and girls mixing not good. Spoils another life. When boy meets girl after 1 year apart, gives family a bad name. Not musical chairs, not double sofa. Character is 3/4 life.
And during one of the other interviews, he elaborated and he said, some of you youth are using Swami's words, saying, Swami says, there's only one caste, the caste of humanity, and on that basis I can just go and marry anyone. Swami said, that's not correct. That's using Swami's words. He said, caste is the same, but culture is different. He said, and he gave an example. He said, you have a vegetarian boy and a Muslim girl. Culture is very different, not right mix. And so that's how he was defining it even further for us.
I think he even stressed that he said you like the girl. He said if parents happy, get married. He put parents in between, that he definitely needs parents' blessing in between. That if parents happy, get married. He stressed it quite clearly. He said you like the girl, parents happy, get married.
And actually in that same sentence he also said that what you do to your parents, your children will do back to you. And he made that very clear.
He along with the marriage, he brought a topic of love. He says marriage, he says it's a worldly love. He says it starts so big, And then he says it slowly diminishes. Then he used an example of how when you first get married and you said, you know, look, you must have heard this example anyway. He said, you go in a park, he says, you know, you see a, we call it a thorn, but his analogy was, oh, you see a thorn. And then he said, you say, oh, my dear, he said, be careful, there's a thorn in front of you. And he says, 6 months later, he says, same wife, he said, same park, and he said, same thorn. And then he said, can't you see there's a thorn in front of you? You know? And he said, give it another couple of years, he said, same wife, he said, same thorn, same park, he said. Then he said, I wish she walks on that thorn, he said. And he says, this is worldly love, he says, starts so big and it slowly diminishes. He says, spiritual love, he said, it's like in a blowing air, you blow slowly, 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 and it gets so big that one day the balloon bursts and the inside air merges with the outside air. He said, that is true love, he says. And wonderful to, you know, for him to sort of say that and you know, put that across.
So now we move into Brother Miku, photos.
Okay, this particular scene, during our stay in Prasanthi, which was Bulb at the time, at one point in time, I can't remember, you guys would remember when this happened, whether it's the second week or third week, we got news off and on that Swami's going to go to Whitefield for a few days. So we all packed up and there was no way we were going to stay back in Prasanthi. We had to go wherever Swami went. So this is an early morning scene. It was a very misty day and it was a shot I took from a sort of a high point, just showing some of the crowd. That's the hall to your right there. Another shot of Sayagita with the keeper's son. Very graceful animal. I remember this particular shot, it took a little bit of time to do these. The rest of the youth were in a study circle in the evening while I went out during the night and photographed the mandir in its night form. Absolutely beautiful atmosphere of how it's lit up and that. And hey, you know, as you see it there, you see it here in your background here. This is a very, very touching image. You have to really analyse this and study this very carefully. Peter Miles, who was very instrumental in Wellington, he's at the photography department in Massey University. He helped me work on this image for a display some years ago, and he's literally spent 1 hour just virtually doing the cow, just retouching the cow to an absolute perfectionist level. When you look at this photograph, what do you see? It wasn't staged. It's just the children, the beautiful innocence, the love that emanates from them. You see Krishna's statue there. If you can see, there's a boy in the background. The way he's embracing Krishna, the love that these children had on their faces, with the cow there is just so beautiful. And I think there's another baby calf just to the right of where the main cow is. It's a very moving image. This was taken somewhere outside the ashram area. A typical sort of a display image, if you take a tour or go into the, say, museum. I think it was up on the hills there. So it's just one of Swami's displays. Can anyone remember this chap's name? Ritesh? Sorry, it's just gone past me, but this elderly gentleman resides in the actual ashram for so many years. He is a historian, photographer that has all of the early archives of Swami, right from early days. He's been photographing Swami right from the early days. So if you see a lot of any early black and white images that are so precious, he's the gentleman responsible for those, and he has I purchased a lot of images of him actually, black and white ones. This was a general hall, the scene of how things are laid out at Prasanthi, and this was one of the open halls, accommodation areas.
If you were naughty, this is where you went for the treatment, you see.
Is it still like this in Prasanthi today? Exactly like this? Okay. That was during darshan. I threw this image in. We know, to me, to all of us, Satya Sai, Siddhi Sai, right here in this picture here. I wanted to include this image. This is the actual image taken at the pilgrimage of Siddhi Sai. Once the youth left Prasanthi, I stayed on a few extra days in Prasanthi, but once I left Prasanthi altogether, I made a trip to Siddhi, and I have a whole documentation of the pilgrimage there as well. But I just wanted to throw that particular photograph in. That is the actual Samadhi, I think, temple there. Okay, Ritesh, this one's especially for you, mate, and Aaron. This is our room. Yeah, this is the typical room that we shared. The middle one, yeah, the middle one is my bed.
With a bag with lots of sweets.
Yeah, at close glance, the little green things on the front of that bed sheet there is the whole stack of films that were still to be shot. So that's my camera bag on the left, the rolls of films that are sitting in that bag. But that's basically my position of where I used to sleep. I think Ritisha was just a little bit further down this way. Yeah, in the corner? Okay. Yeah, and the bathrooms to the left. Okay, come back to the early photos. That's the South 5 again. So we've done a full circle on that one. I can either leave it there or flip onto the other. We'll need to change to the other folder. Can you change it? Okay. Yeah.
We'll just stop there for the photos for the moment.
Sure.
And then we'll carry on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Was summer showers brought up again while you were in Prasanthi?
After the darshan at night time, we used to get together every night, and Dr. Bernard Gilman won't let us go. We had to stay and go through the study circle, so we did go through summer showers every night and choose one of the values, and that went on at least for an hour every night, given that white filter. And I'm not sure why the interview with Swami brought anything up regarding summer showers, but we did not leave that behind.
Swami did actually bring it up quite often. He asked us, what types of knowledge are there? And we would hum and ha, and we'd say bookish, and we would hard to try and think of it. That's all there is, that's all you guys know, that's all you've got, bookish knowledge. And then he'd go and tell us all the types of knowledge, superficial knowledge, and then he'd finish with practical knowledge, and he said that is the most important. So he referred to the summer showers over and over again in our interviews, especially the first couple.
Now we come to the time where you share with us your most memorable moment and how has it influenced your life to date? Who's starting?
We put Peekaboo on the spot.
We'll let the ladies go first. I think for me the most important one is Sashi has shared tonight. We were all cleaning and doing our packing up and we were ready to leave for the last day. And when we were told that the boys were in the interview and Swami is looking for us to give Pad Namaskar, and I think that was the highlight of our trip for the girls. And we all lined up in white saris and sitting down, and Swami came and it was amazing, touching his feet. I was trying to feel for the Bahrain, I couldn't. It was so soft like cotton wool. And Swami did pat on our head, and from that day my life changed. It's all about living for others, and I've got no interest in the material world, and it's about sharing my knowledge and looking after each other, even though we haven't seen each other for such a long time. Sashi's little boy and my son, they go to the same school, and we met after such a long time, but the love was the same. You don't have to see each other every day. You don't have to talk to each other, but there's a connection, and it will be forever. When we saw Jason at the movie theatre, and it's just like good old days. And omnipresent, as our Bhikkhu has said, it's true. I talk to Swami, I see Swami every day, he's part of my life. I live in Dannemora, but this is the first time I've been here tonight. I do make an effort to go to the bhajans, but really don't have time with 3 boys at home. But I haven't left a Swami a single moment. Every night I talk to him. Even in my school, and I just pray before I teach. And before I come home, I'm driving, it's talking to Swami. So it was a very important part of our life. And what I am today is because of my trip really changed the way I think.
Thanks, Latika. So I'll just add to that. I think probably the most important takeaway moment for me from this whole trip was developing a mental connection with Swami, an inner connection with him. I think, as you probably have figured this out by now, that when the girls were not getting the interview, you were sort of kind of sitting in the darshan line and really kind of wanting to have this connection with Swami, and you sort of kind of saying, well, how actually can I do that? And just by being there, you started to develop this mental connection, this inner connection with him, and this is like a direct communication with Swami and a direct link with him. And you can basically talk to him about anything, and anything and everything. And you don't have to kind of wait for a friend or anything. He is like your friend. He is your guiding light. So for me, that was the moment that kind of defined for me as to how I start having those mental conversations with Swami, how I build my inner connection with him. And to this day, I still have that with me, and I know that I can be anywhere, anytime. I don't need to kind of resort to a pen and paper, but I can have that conversation with him. And I know that he's always listening and providing that guidance. And at some time, you sort of kind of think always and reflect to say, why is this happening to me? What's a life lesson in this experience that I'm not kind of quite seeing it at this point in time? But you sort of kind of stand back and you just experience that moment, and you go, and after a while, you can actually literally see how it has unfolded. What was the divine plan there for you? And I mean, I can kind of give you numerous examples, but it was just being able to have that faith and have that connection that you could actually know to say that it is his plan, and be able to just let go and experience that plan. So you know that whatever is happening is for the right and for the right reason for you. So it was my little point.
Would the boys like to share a few?
I think the most memorable thing for me was Brother Arun and Kundam used to always drag me to the Eastern canteen and make me feed on so much rice. and then put me in the corner to sleep there. Because I think back then there was only two canteens. It was Western canteen and Eastern canteen. And Kundan, myself and Arun, we were just fond of Indian food. Still are. And yeah, come to the serious part of it. Swami has fed on to us so much that our journey will never stop. And he does say that start early, drive slowly, and reach safely. And even though sometimes we might be active in the organization, we might not be, but this is a personal journey. And, you know, it never stops, you know, whether you're part of the organization or not. But you always have Swami's work to do as an individual, even at home, and all that as well. And there's one personal experience that I'll share. I was one of the fortunate one from the group to actually have 5 interviews. There was 3 of us that got pulled out from the group, and Swami took us on personally. And he took me on an interview room and chatting together. He looked sort of straight in my eyes. And this is a personal thing that I'll share, which is personal, but at the same time I think it relates to all of us. And he looked right in my eyes and he said, very depressed mind. And then I asked Swami, he says, Swami, why? You know, I folded my hand, just like, you know, pleading. I said, why, Swami? And he said, company. And that's what he said. And then he changed the whole topic altogether. And that sort of left me puzzled. And obviously once, you know, this is what Swami does, you know, then he leaves the rest of the puzzle for you to put together. And that's when the journey begins, because you start to ponder upon what he's saying, company, and then you think, okay, what sort of company do I have? You know, I've got a good group of friends from your youth, you know, your school, and in your work life and all that as well, your family is good. And 3 years later, one day sitting in a bathroom, it dawned on me that what he really meant, company, is that as an individual, you know, wherever you are, you know, you are forever in the company of your mind, right? And that is the thing that either makes you happy or makes you sad, because it's your own thought process that you are always in, you know. You think that you might go to work and you're in the company of a fellow, you're at home, you're in the company of a family, but no, even though while you are sitting here, your mind is probably somewhere else. So your mind is churning you all the time. And that 3 years later, that dawned on me that thank you, Swami. And he stresses quite importantly that satsang, but it's actually, you got to ask yourself that what he means by that, you know. It's this thing that we are in the company of all the time. We are constantly thinking. And that's one thing you got to watch of, is a company of the mind. And he does say that it's your mind that will actually either lead you to destruction or for your full betterment of your life. And that's a company we got to be completely aware of. And that's after 3 years later that dawned on me. And I can still remember that moment. He just looked right in my eyes. And he said, very depressed mind. And I said, why, Swami? He said, company. You know, that word still rings in my ears. And it's very true what he said, company. And I just thought that it was personal, but at that time, but now I think, you know, it's the right moment to share for you guys as well, to know what he means. And the changing is always changing, ever changing. You know, we carry so much from the past, and he's always there. And it's a slow journey. You know, it's something we can't rush. You know, and it's at his time, not our time. So one must realize that, and just carry on. Simple as that. And it's very nice to be here, and thank you to the initiative. And actually, Michael said Viva was one of the key factors. But I would say Uncle Ravi was one of the key factors because he planted the seed. I remember he came to North Shore and he prompted the idea is that, one day maybe you guys should all get together, the 94 core youth, and do something like that. And
21st birthday last year.
okay, yeah. So he was the one, and then somehow, Sister Viva sort of took on that somehow. That telepathy must have worked.
Well, the boys never get the job done, right? You've got to
The
get
telepathy's been going on for 2 years.
Yeah.
Every time we meet up somewhere in Sydney or wherever, everyone's, oh, we should get together, we should get together. It's like 2 years now. So when Uncle Ravi said, Viva, can you organise this? And I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be such a hard task because everybody's everywhere. But when I started organising it, everything just fell into place and you all agreed to come and Narun said he was on board and Brother Bhikkhu rang out of the blue and I had no idea who you were at the time. But it really inspired me that you were making all this effort with the photos and that you were going to be here with the group. So thank you. We're all taking credit, but really Swami wanted this to happen.
Maybe he wanted us to meet this.
Special moment, I think, for me happened a few years ago, maybe 20 years after the interview. And just moving on to what Yogi was saying, for a lot of us that were in the interview, and maybe I'm speaking out of school, but life wasn't really that easy once we came back. I think a lot of people are good friends still and were friends, and a lot of us had a lot of personal things that we had to fight. And I think those experiences helped a lot of us get through, and maybe some of us didn't. But the one thing that I always think of now, we've all got stressful lives, and Swami always used to say to us in the interviews, and someone would ask Swami, when are you going to Whitefoot? After every interview. And for some reason he'd use this analogy, and we've documented all these analogies, and now when I deeply think about it, I realize what it means. Swami always used to say, you guys have got to be like a camera.
Yeah,
What is the exact word? You've got to be ready like a camera. Like someone's taking a photo, you guys have to be ready. Because he wasn't going to tell us when he's going to Whitefield, and we had to plan a lot of different things, but all I guess we're saying is stay alert. And for myself, one of the biggest lessons is, living in the moment. I think that's come into play, and a lot of what Swami was saying about the past and about the mind, if you're here right now, which some of us aren't, I was probably gone 10 minutes ago, it's the concentration levels we have. And how do we concentrate? And there was a thing on concentration, and I remember I told you when I got in here, Swami did speak about concentration and meditation, and about being different levels. But a lot of us, maybe I'm wrong, but and science has proven it, 18 seconds is all we can concentrate on a subject before another thought comes. And you can test it. In meditation, a lot of us sit there, might do it for a couple of hours, but I can tell you, a lot of us don't really concentrate. And what's come out of all this for me is to live in the moment. You have to work on your concentration, and to work on your concentration, you need to focus. And to focus, guess what? You need discipline, which is exactly what we went through 22 years ago. So, personally, I think that's something I've taken out. A lot of people have different experiences, and you hear about all these, rough things happening around in the world at the moment. But if you live in the moment, it shouldn't really affect you, I think. And the past is the past. The future, what Swami told us is about the past being the past, and the future, no one really cares, or something like that. If you know it, and if you stay here right now, you will. This is my word, you'll die very happy because you know that you remember the moments. And a lot of us are here today because we remember that we were actually not physically, we were mentally present there for those 6 weeks. We were actually there. There was no noise in our head. And the discipline allowed us to just be focused. And we can sit here 22 years later and remember this. I mean, I can't remember what I did last week sometimes, but there's key things here that we all remember, which is coming down. Anyway, so that's my personal share.
There were many, many amazing moments there, and it's really hard to pinpoint what is the one thing that I took away from it. I think it's moulded my life. But we asked Swami, you know, when we need to make a decision, how do we make this decision so it's a good decision? And he says, place the thought in the light of your conscience. If there is any doubt, have nothing to do with it. And that's guided my life. You know, any time I'm wanting to do something, any time I'm trying to do something, if I was wise enough, and most of the times I have been, but sometimes I've forgotten, if I'm wise enough to stop and talk to Swami and say, Swami, what is it you want me to do here? What is the right thing to do? And if it feels like, yeah, this is a possibility, this is fine, I'll go ahead with it. And it works out. But if any thought, any doubt comes into mind, then I know it's not the right time, it's not the right decision. And it's been really helpful.
For me, the whole trip, it was a point in time in my life, it was completely life-changing. Who I am today, where I am today, was totally dependent on that moment in that trip. And I'll give you a bit of background. Leading up to the trip, you know, we did all the sadhana and everything, but I always used to look at myself as being, you know, lower than everyone else. I used to think of myself as being, you know, a dot inside a dot. And I used to look at these guys during the trip, and I used to really look up to them thinking, you know, Swami, I don't deserve to be here. These guys are so much more spiritually advanced than I am. You know, how come I'm in this group? And I used to think like that throughout the first interview. And in the second interview, I was actually sick that day. And I remember Mata Betty telling us that no matter how sick you are, unless you're in the hospital, you have to go for darshan. So I made it to darshan. I was literally sweating, and my whole clothing was soaking wet with sweat. And Swami called us for an interview that day. And that interview was 1 hour, 20 minutes long. And it was tough. But during the interview, I was sitting at Swami's feet, holding his feet. And at the end of the interview, Swami lifts my hand, he goes, time to go. And he literally lifts me up. And I'm standing next to Swami. And I'm standing next to Swami, he turns around and asks for the vibhuti basket. And I'm sitting there, Swami's turned around, and I'm thinking, Swami, I'm the scum of the earth. I don't even deserve to be here. Swami immediately turned around. And he looked at me straight in the eyes, and he said, he pointed to my heart, and he said, you're a good boy. And he gave me this hug. That moment completely changed my mind and completely changed my whole life. That self-confidence he was talking about completely went right through my entire body that moment and has never left. Tell you a funny thing that happened like 10 seconds after he did that. And I need a demo actually, because this is actually, you won't believe what I did after that actually, because this is how stupid I was. Because confidence becomes stupidity after a while. And I'll give you an example with this movie. Who's shorter than me? Probably no one. But you got a frizzy hair. You're close enough to Swami. So imagine this is Swami. I'm standing on this side of Swami. Right? I'm holding his hand like this. Right? And I'm bouncing with this confidence. This confidence has just gone right through me. Swami's giving vibhuti with the other hand. And I'm walking behind him. And this is what I do. Not only that, I put my whole hand in his head, massaging his head like this, and Swami's walking around giving vibhuti. And everyone's looking at me going, what the hell is this guy doing? I'm so grateful that Swami didn't turn around and make me the vibhuti, but that moment, Swami knew I was on a different planet. And from that point onwards, that self-confidence just came through me. And just to follow up, what's that done for my life? Well, I was in second year at university. The following year is my final year at university. Swami told me to do accounting, just as an example. I went for a job interview with PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was Coopers and Lybrand at the time. They asked me, so why did you want to become an accountant? Typical question from a senior partner that was interviewing me. I said, because my guru told me. And we talked about nothing but Swami and his teachings for the whole interview, and I got the job.
You also got slut money, right?
Oh, yeah. During actually all the interviews, but the last interview in particular, Swami literally beat me up. And when I say beat me up, like literally, he would slap me on the face. I give an example, like literally that hard, non-stop for ages and ages and ages throughout the interview. When I was holding his hand, he would dig his nails into my hand. And at the time, I was trying to think, should I let go? Should I move away? Or should I just enjoy the moment? So I enjoyed the moment. My aunt told me later on, she lives in the ashram, and she told me that when Swami hits you, he's taking away some of your karma. So I literally got beaten up. So I can tell you right now, I was actually very sore the next day, and I must have done some really bad things. So thank you, Swami.
Mike, would you like to share?
I guess for me it made such an imprint on my heart that because prior to having a close contact, it was a distance, a little bit distant with Swami's there and this is Michael. But in the interview, something changed and actually I didn't get as much conversation with Swami as probably most of the others. But when I did, Swami would go like that and ask something, he'd just go like that. As like acknowledging an old friend, you don't have to say much, it's just, how's it? And for me, it just, it's like that old friend, and that feeling comes up in that imprint. So that was really what I took away and continues throughout my life. Yeah, that joy. And also, what also happened was especially with the boys, the brotherhood, and that was so precious, and even just sitting these guys and lasses as well, it brings back a joy and such a wonderful part of my life. Very, very precious. Did you get that ring during that? I'd say physically comfortable, but we're kind of on each other like this. And of course, Ritisha's up right next to Swami, right at the back of the room, and he's talking away, and again he looks at me and he just goes, he goes like this, just like that. So I'm looking around, the wall's here, and I'm looking behind me, just to check if there's anyone else. And so I get up and go right, and kneel literally right in front of Swami, and I'm looking at him eye to eye, and he just creates this ring, puts it on, he taps me or something, and like that, and he makes this gesture. So back I go. And that was the kind of interaction they had. So there wasn't a lot of words, but just a depth of love and joy. Yeah. So
This is a funny note. I need to share this. A particular group member, we won't name him, but he was given a ring by Swami, and it was loose. And I remember there was a focus of the meeting outside the interviews. How can the ring be loose? And it's like he was like, oh, it's loose. Should we say ring? And so he was worried. He was very worried. It's loose, right? This was perfect. He looked at the microphone and said, "Hey, that was perfect, man. Look at Abhi's one there. This is great." And then he, the next interview, he he rushes into the front because he has a point to prove. And Swami's talking, we're all sitting, Swami, excuse me, Swami. Like, this is loose. And Swami didn't fix it, right? I don't think he did. He just laughed at it. And then he came out and he was all confused for 5 years. I'm pretty sure he's figured it out. Pretty much bad.
Swami did the normal ring which you buy at the ashram.
Yes.
And Swami said, change your heart to gold. Not share it.
It was a copper ring.
It was a
Someone had
copper ring
ring,
and Swami did.
Yeah.
It says, change your heart to gold.
Yeah, and it changed the face
Yeah.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, changed the face
The
of
right-
the ring completely.
Yes.
I think that was one of the first miracles I think that we actually saw. Swami did perform many miracles in front of our.
We haven't talked too much about the miracle side of things, but he certainly showed his love, through many of the miracles that he performed in front of us for the various devotees in the forms of rings and things like that. The one that really stood out for me, which is absolutely unbelievable. I think you guys all remember this very vividly, especially the ones sitting in right up close to him. Swami has his sleeves completely rolled up. The robe, you can see there's nothing between his hands and the length of his arm. And he just waved his hand like this, and you won't believe it. You know Japmala, the meditation beads. Now, if you were to grab a long length of Japmala and put that in your hand, would that not fill up the cup of your hand completely and overflow? I mean, those beads, there's so many of them, and it would just overflow in your hand, right? This is Swami in absolute thin air, just went like this and like that. And this whole length of Japmala just came out from under his hand and he just threw it to us. And it was within a split second. His both sleeves were rolled up. It's just one of those things, many of the things that we saw happen. But just want to say, wherever you are on this journey from here on, one thing that I learned of Swami's presence, and it means a lot. There are two things that I really learned. One, I did ask Swami a personal question. Where does love start? Where does it emanate from? Where do you start practicing Sai's love? And his answer to me, when he speaks in an interview room and he gives you an answer, it could be meant for anyone, but I believe this question that I asked him the answer he gave me was really meant for everyone, but specifically to me too, because it's come true. He said to me that the love has to emanate and start from your home. Before you start going out in the community and doing this and spreading the love of Sai or doing God's work or anything like that, he said it must start in your home. And where does it start in your home? It starts with your parents. Your mother, your father are God. And he says you must start with your parents first. It's not your wife. It's not even your children. Your parents come first. And I've been very blessed in my life. I've had two very elderly parents. I'm the only one. And I've looked after both of my parents right through their old age. My dad passed away at 86 in year 2000. My mum is still here today, but was very ill the last 2 weeks and was in hospital. She's 93. And Swami's message to me about parents being God and that your being first duty is what I learnt and what I'm doing today. One last thing, I just want to say, you know, no matter where you are in life, it doesn't have to be here in a mandir, it can be at home, it could be anywhere. But remember the power of prayer, praying for someone has a very, very powerful, profound effect. Believe me. You know, if you want to reach out for somebody who's suffering or whatever, you know, think of them and really, really pray. It's like, you know, when something happens to us personally, we think of God at that point in time. Other times we might not even think of Him, you know. But reach out to Him, pray. Because I tell you what, I've had 5 miracles that have been situations that have been turned around from one thing to the other. I mean, I'm even on an operating table. A surgeon has to operate on me, and next minute he turns around and the only word he could spell out, this is miraculous. A surgeon, a top surgeon, couldn't explain why he was not now going to perform an operation on me when it needed to be done. The symptom I had for 3 months, physically there, was removed instantly. I realised the answer. You don't realise it straight away, but you'll realise it later in His own time. He will come to you and say, He was there at that particular point in time. And I've had many encounters like that. You know, even from deathbed. Even my wife, who was on a deathbed, praying for 1 hour of Swami's name, reciting when she's going into a coma, completely turned her situation around, and the doctor's saying there's nothing wrong with you. So please, you know, carry that. I could tell you in more details, but and they are very touching stories. You know, for someone that you love so much, and that are dying, and you need a miracle from God. He delivered it through a 1-hour prayer. The doctors couldn't even explain it. Even the results in the hospital that were held for 3 months were thrown out the door. Say Ram, and God bless you all. Thank you for allowing for my presence here today, and you know, for sharing in the images, and hopefully you might be able to see. There's about another 50 images there too that might be able to flip through during some point in time. But anyway, thank you.
Beautiful experiences, guys. Question, did Swami give any message for the youth?
He said, there is no youth, there's no difference. We're all one. Well, he was really strong about not us feeling separate from anything else. We're all one.
And following on from that, he did speak about ego, and the ego of being a youth. And we didn't realise it back then, but we all now, in our 20s, still not 30s. But he did say one day the youthfulness will disappear. And so if I got the message, if I was you, don't let your egos get out of whack. And I think that's when we came back, that's one of the messages we did practice was let's not be a show-off, So something that we were blessed with.
More important question, did Swami give a message to New Zealand?
Yes, in fact he did. We asked Swami, very last interview, one of the last questions we got to ask Swami was, Swami, what message do you have for New Zealand? And Swami then became really serious, and he looked at us and he said, he thought for a second, and then he looked at us and he said, tell them very strongly, human life is very, very important. Do not waste this opportunity. And that was it.
That brings us to the end of our questions. So I'll hand it back to you, Mike. You wanna... That's all the questions we had written down.
Okay, so we've gone over time. Perhaps getting a little bit hungry. So, thank you for your inspiration and to drive us. It's really appreciated. There are some. I really appreciate Uncle Bullard for coming to record this. We very appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. Coming all the way from Hamilton. Thank you to our sound man. I can see you up there.
I heard someone snoring.
Thank you, Kumar.
Ladies there.
Yeah, really appreciate it for spending the time with us and sorting us out. It's really important, and others. And for all of you to spend your time and come and share this evening with us. It's like been 22 years. We've actually, I can't believe it, just got to sit and really reminisce a bit. And so hopefully it's been a bit interesting this evening. Gratitude to those who made food.
Most important.
Yeah. Which we will have very shortly, and just share some sights. So with that, should we finish with the...
Before you finish, I just want to, it's been really wonderful to hear all of you. And I can see that you've got detailed notes. So you've had the satsang. Have you ever thought of writing it down? It's so valuable.
Yeah, this is the thing. This was discussed, and a lot of, in the notes that we recorded, for example, Ritesh has got his personal notes, which he wrote, and then there was notes that were sort of redone, and which I have. But the thing is, with that, even in that, there's some discrepancies, and this is to do with some personal things about who said what or what Swami said to that. Because I know, because there's something about myself, and I said, no, Swami didn't say that. He said something else, and I experienced something else. So that could be confusing if it were just to give it to someone. The messages, Swami, we haven't touched on really a lot of what Swami said about in the summer showers, but he talked a lot of confidence and mind and so many things. And that was actually in the summer showers. It's just the way he put it to us is slightly different. So we felt we didn't really want to share our notes because of that fact. There's some personal things, there's some discrepancies. And that could just cause a little bit of confusion really for some people. That's probably the reason why.
Yeah, just on that, for example, there was a number of things Swami said to us in the interview, which is the exact opposite of what he says publicly. And so, and the reason he says things is because it's very specific for that group or that person. Even some things he said in the interview, like one person would hear it, another person wouldn't. Or you would hear two different words, and the word makes a huge difference. And we were debating forever, I remember, on some of the words, and because somebody says, no, I definitely heard this, and somebody else saying, no, I definitely heard this. So, but both words are probably correct for that individual. And so we didn't want to cause confusion and say anything different to what Swami publicly says. But for that reason, we've actually, over the years, we have shared quite a few things that are probably more appropriate to share.
Okay, Yes, we'll finish with the Om Sri Shanti Zen food prayer. So.